I came home from California 8 days early. Because I did not want to wake anybody at that hour, I parked down by the shop and walked up the lane in the dark. That is how I came to be standing outside the window of my own honey house at 20 minutes to 10 at night, listening to my grandson's wife explain to a lawyer in Billings that the old man would not be a problem because the old man is gone every February. Give me a second with that before I go on. She was not lying. Everything she said into that phone was true, and I had made every word of it true myself, one winter at a time, for 52 years. So the question I have carried around ever since is not, how could she? The question is, why did it take a stranger on a telephone to tell me what my own calendar had been saying out loud since before she was born? My name is Ellis Vandehey. I am 76. I live outside a town called Kilgore in Vantine County, Montana, up against the west side of the Highwoods, about an hour east of Great Falls, on 160 acres of bench ground my grandfather proved up in 1911, and my father never once let anybody put a plow through. I have kept bees for 51 years. My wife Doreen has been gone 6 years this November. Before I get into it, do something small for me, because I would honestly like to know. Tell me the 1 week of the year you are always somewhere else. Everybody has got one. The hunting camp, the shift you always volunteer for, the drive to your sister's, the 4 days at the lake, the stretch of time you have been gone so regular for so long that other people schedule around you without asking anymore. Tell me what yours is. And then tell me whether anybody's expecting you this year. Mine is February. It has been February since 1974. Here is what that means. For anybody who has never been around commercial bees, almonds in California bloom in the middle of February, and they cannot pollinate themselves. It takes about 2 hives an acre to set a crop, and there are not close to enough bees living in that valley to do the job. So every winter, almost every commercial beekeeper in this country loads his colonies on a semi and hauls them there. I have done it 52 times. You start staging hives in the last week of January. You strap them on pallets, 4 to a pallet. You net the load. You drive at night when they are clustered and quiet, and you come off the interstate and get them set in the orchards before the trees break. Then you sit in a motel in Wasco or Delano for 6 or 7 weeks. You feed, and you check, and you argue with orchard managers about frames of brood, and when the bloom is over, you load them up and you bring them home. It is the money. It has always been the money. Honey is what people think a beekeeper sells. Pollination is what actually pays the note. Almonds paid off my first truck, both of my kids' weddings, and about a third of Doreen's last 2 years. And every one of those 52 winters, this place stood here without me in it from the last week of January until sometime in the first half of April. Now let me tell you the one thing about bees that most people have never heard, because it is the thing this whole story turns on. A dead hive is full of honey. That is not what anybody expects. When people picture a beehive dying, they picture something you would find under the lid, a pile of bees on the bottom board, some evidence. That is not how it goes most of the time. What happens is the colony fails out in the field. They go out, and they do not come back, a few hundred a day, and it does not look like anything at all. And then one warm morning in the spring, you walk your rows with a hive tool in your hand, and you lift a lid, and everything under it is perfect. Comb drawn out beautiful, frames heavy with capped honey, more honey than you have got any business seeing, pollen packed in the corners. A little brood, everything in the house where it belongs, and nobody home. There is no smell. There is no noise. That is the part that fools people. Beekeepers who lose everything are almost never the ones who got hit by something loud. They are the ones who walked past a yard all winter thinking, well, that one is quiet, that one is doing fine. My father taught me the rule that goes with it. And he was not a bee man. He was a section foreman for the Milwaukee Road until they pulled the rail out from under him. The rule is this: you do not open a hive because you are worried. You open it on a schedule, whether you think anything is wrong or not, because the day you start opening things only when you are worried is the day you have decided that being calm is the same as being right. I have said that sentence to hired help every spring for 40 years. I want you to hold on to it because I am going to say it back to you at the end of this, and by then, it is going to mean something I did not intend when I started. The other thing you need from me before I go on is Doreen, and a thing she made me do that people in this county have laughed at for 50 years. You tell the bees. It is an old custom. Her people brought it over from somewhere in the north of England 4 generations back, and by the time it got to Doreen, it had gotten simpler and better. When somebody in the house dies, you go out to the yard, and you go hive to hive, and you knock once on the lid with your knuckle, and you say it out loud. You say who it was. And you drape a piece of black cloth over the outer cover, and you leave it there until you are done being the kind of sad where you cannot eat. The first time she made me do it was 1971 for my father. I was 21 years old, and I felt like a fool, and I did it because she was standing at the end of the row with her arms folded, and I have never once in my life gotten past her when she was standing like that. But here's the part of it that was hers and not her grandmother's, and it is why any of the rest of this happened at all. She said you do not only tell them the deaths, she said you tell them everything. You tell them when a baby comes. You tell them when somebody gets married, and when somebody leaves, and when a boy gets home safe from the service, and when somebody has taken a job in another state and is not coming back. She said if the only time you ever walk out to those hives and knock is when somebody is in a box, then they are going to learn the sound of you and they are going to dread it, and so are you. I did not think she meant the bees. I do not think she meant the bees either. So that is who I was on the 7th of April, walking up my own lane in the dark with my hat in my hand because the wind comes off the high woods in the spring and takes it if you do not. The honey house sits about 80 yards up from the shop, and it has one window on the north wall that Doreen made me put in so she could see the yard light while she worked. That window has never closed right. There is a gap at the bottom of the sash about the width of a pencil, and on a still night you can stand outside it and hear a person talking inside like they are in the truck with you. The light was on. Marla's car was there. That was not strange. She does the books for my grandson Wyatt's outfit, and she has done mine for 4 years. Since the spring, my handwriting got to where the bank called about it, and she does it in there because it is warm and quiet and there is a desk. I heard 4 sentences. I am going to give them to you in the order I got them, because the order is the whole thing. The first one was, no, he is not back until the 10th or the 11th. He never comes back before the 10th. The second one was, I have got all 3 of them. They are recorded. I have got the receipts and the stamped copies. The third one was, well, that is what I am asking you, because there is no way he pays it. He is 76 years old, and he is asset-rich and cash-poor, and everybody in this county knows it. And the fourth one was the one that put my hand flat against the siding, and it was this. She said, look, I do not want to fight. I just want the other owners to get something out of it for once. The other owners. I have lived on that 160 acres since I was 4 days old. My father died in the front room of that house. My mother died in the back one. I have buried a wife and a dog and 2 horses on it, and I have paid the taxes on it every November of my adult life. And in 76 years, I had never one time heard a human being use the word owners about it in the plural. Now, everybody who hears this story wants to know why I did not walk around the corner and open that door. I will give you the reason people accept first. And then I will give you the true one, and you can decide which one you believe. The reason people accept is that my truck was parked down at the shop, which meant if I backed off that window and went around the front, I would have to cross 40 feet of gravel under a yard light on a pole, and she would have seen a shape moving, and she would have known that somebody had been standing at that window. And I did not want her to know that, because I did not yet know what I did not want her to know. The true one is smaller, and it is not flattering. I was tired. I had been on the road 26 hours out of Delano with a bad wheel bearing on the trailer and a load of bees that had gotten hot on me in Nevada, and I was 76 years old and standing in my own yard in the dark, and I understood, standing there, that if I opened that door, my life was going to be a different life, starting immediately. And I did not want it to be a different life tonight. I wanted a shower. I wanted to sleep in my own bed. I wanted one more night back inside the life where I still ran 400 and some head of bees on a place that was mine. So I walked back down the lane the same way I came up, in the grass along the fence line where it does not crunch, and I slept in the truck. At 4, I woke up cold and drove into Kilgore and sat in the parking lot of the Ranchette Cafe until Verna opened at 6, and I ate eggs and read a newspaper I did not see one word of. And at 10 after 7, I drove back up my own lane with the sun on the mirrors, making plenty of noise, and I got out and slammed the door twice like a man arriving. Marla came out on the step with her coat over her arm, and I want to tell you about her face because I am only going to get one chance to, and it is going to come back at the end of this. For about half a second before any of it caught up with her, she looked pleased, not startled, not caught. Pleased, the way you look when a person you like turns up. And then the half second was over and the rest of her face arrived and did all the correct things. The surprise and the you are early and the how were the almonds. I have thought about that half second more than I have thought about anything else in this whole business. And I will tell you at the end what I finally decided it was. And then I did the thing that I still cannot fully explain to my own satisfaction. I hugged her. I put my arms around my grandson's wife in my own yard at 10 after 7 in the morning, and I thanked her. I thanked her for keeping an eye on the place. I thanked her for the books, for the fuel receipts she had been chasing down all winter, for taking my mail. I asked about the kids. I told her the bloom had been thin and the almond people had been fair with me anyhow. I stood there for 4 minutes being a grandfather with a duffel bag in my hand. And every second of it I could hear her voice through a pencil gap, saying the other owners. Now understand something. I am not a cunning man. I have never won anything by being clever. I was not building a trap in my yard that morning. I was doing the only thing 51 years of work had trained into me, which is that when you find a hive that is not right, you do not tear into it. You give it smoke and you give it a minute, and the minute is not for the bees, it is for you. She got in her car and went down the lane, and I stood there until I could not hear it anymore. Then I went inside, and I did not sleep for 2 days, and on Monday morning, I drove to the courthouse. Not to fight anybody. Hold on to that, because it changes how you read everything after. I drove to the courthouse because of my father's rule, because something was quiet, and quiet is not the same as fine, and the way you handle quiet is you open it on a schedule and see what is under the lid. I went up to the counter at the clerk and recorder, and I asked a woman named Merrily if she would pull me whatever she had on my quarter section, and I gave her the legal description off my tax notice, and I stood there with my hat in my hands expecting one sheet of paper with my name on it. She came back in about 10 minutes with a stack about as thick as a church bulletin, and she set it down and turned it around so it faced me, and she said, "Ellis, do you want the whole chain or just the last 20 years? There were 9 names on it. I had been the owner of that place for 43 years the way a man is the owner of a dog that follows him home. Everybody agreed. Nobody had ever once written it down that way. Let me lay it out for you the way Merrily laid it out for me, because if you take one thing away from an old man talking for an hour, I would like it to be this part. My grandfather filed on that bench in 1911 and proved up on it in 1916. It went to my father, Sim Vandehey, clean, one name. My father died in 1983. He was 68, and he had a stroke on a Tuesday, and he was gone by Friday, and he did not leave a will. He was not careless. He was a man who paid cash for everything and thought a will was for people who had something complicated, and what he had was a house, a tractor, and a quarter section, and 3 children who all got along. When a man dies in this state without a will, the law does not ask what everybody understood. It has a list. That quarter section went, by operation of law, in equal thirds, to me and to my brother Verl and to my sister Nadine. Verl never wanted it. He drove long haul out of Spokane, and he came home twice a year. In 1991, I gave him a cashier's check for $11,000, which was a fair number then, and he signed a deed on the hood of his own truck in front of the post office in Kilgore, and I folded it up and put it in the top drawer of the desk in the front room, and I never took it back out again. Nadine stayed. Nadine lived in Great Falls and came out every Sunday she could, and she is the one who taught me how to run an extractor. She died in 2009, and when she died, her third did not go anywhere. It just kept dividing. It went to her 4 children, and each of the 4 ended up holding 1/12 of my grandfather's homestead. Danelle in Spokane, Rob in Cheyenne, Kirby in Great Falls. And Arliss, who was the oldest and who sat with her mother for the last 11 weeks, and who I would have said was the closest thing I had to a sister. 2/3 mine. 1/12 to each of 4 people, 3 of whom I had seen a total of maybe 9 times since Nadine's funeral. That was the paper. Now comes the piece nobody handed me. This one I built myself. For 40 years, I told those 4 kids that place was theirs. I said it at funerals. I said it at Christmas, with a plate in my hand. I said it to Rob when he was 19 and had just gotten laid off, standing in my shop with the wind blowing. I said it every single time in the same shape. I said, "You all have got a piece of this place, and it will always be here." I thought I was being generous. I thought I was doing what my father would have done, which was to make sure nobody in the family ever felt like they had been shut out of the ground they came from. What I was actually doing was handing out keys to a house I was still living in, and then acting surprised that somebody used one. There is no crime anywhere in this story. Say that back to yourself now, because I know the shape people expect once a story opens the way this one opened. Nobody forged my name. Nobody drugged me. Nobody put a piece of paper in front of me and told me it was something else. Every single thing that was done to me over the next 9 weeks was legal, and most of it was done by people who thought they were being reasonable, and one of them was a 33-year-old woman with 2 kids and a spreadsheet who could not tell her own husband how bad it had gotten. That is what makes it worth an hour of your life, because the thing that takes a place away from an old man in this country is almost never a criminal. It is a rule that was sitting there the whole time, doing exactly what it was written to do, waiting for somebody to read it before he did. I asked Merrily for copies of everything, and she charged me $1 a page, and I stood at that counter, and got out my billfold like a customer in my own life. And then, having come that far with no brace left in me, I asked her one more thing. I asked her whether anything had been filed on that description recently. She said, "Define recently." I said, "This year." And she went back to the machine, and she was gone longer than the first time. She came back with 3 sheets. They were quitclaim deeds. I did not know that word yet on that particular morning, but I know it now, and I will tell you what it means the way it was told to me, which is that a quitclaim deed is a piece of paper where a person says, "Whatever I have got in this ground, if I have got anything at all, I am handing it to you, and I am not promising you it is worth a nickel." Grantor, Donnell. Grantor, Rob. Grantor, Kirby. Grantee on all 3, the same 3 words, Marla Jo Vandehey. I stood there and read my own last name on a deed I had never heard of, in the handwriting of a title company in Great Falls. I did not say anything to Marilee. I paid her $3 more, took my hat off the counter, went out onto the courthouse steps, and sat down on them, which is not something a man my age should do, because getting back up is a production. Then I drove to Sylvie Mattoon. Sylvie has had an office on the 2nd floor over what used to be the Coast to Coast for 31 years. There is no elevator. There is a coffee can on the landing with a hand-painted sign that says, "Put your gum in here," which has been there since her father had the practice, and neither of them has ever explained it. She read all 3 deeds twice without saying a word, and then she asked me if I had anything at home with Verl's name on it. I told her about the drawer. I want you to see her face when I told her that, because it was the first good thing that happened to me in 4 days. She put both hands flat on the desk. She said, "Ellis, go home right now and get it, and do not stop anywhere." 76 years old, land under me the entire time, and this had never once been explained to me. A deed is good between the 2 people who signed it from the minute it is signed. Vro handed me that third in 1991, and it was mine that afternoon. But recording it is not a formality. Recording is how the rest of the world finds out. A deed sitting in a drawer for 35 years protects you from the man who signed it. It does not protect you from anybody who comes along afterward and looks in the one place people are supposed to be able to look. I had spent 35 years being right in a drawer. We recorded it that Thursday. $8 a page. It took 11 minutes. And then Sylvie sat me down and told me the hard half, which is that recording Verl's third did not touch Nadine's third one bit, because Nadine's third was never mine and never had been. What I owned, as of that Thursday, in writing, where anybody could see it, was 2/3. And the other third belonged to 4 people, 3 of whom had already sold to a woman who had eaten Thanksgiving dinner at my table. A lot of men get in the truck right about here. I did not, and the why of it matters. People have called it patience since. It was not patience. It was the trade. When you find a hive that is queenless in the spring, everything in you wants to go in after her. And every beekeeper who has been at it more than about 4 years knows what happens when you do that. You tear the box apart. You roll bees. You kill her if she is in there after all, and you end up standing in the yard holding 9 frames and knowing less than you did when you walked up. You give it smoke. You wait a week. You come back and you look for eggs, because eggs do not lie and people do. So I did not call Marla. I did not call my grandson, and that decision cost me things I will lay out for you before the end, because there is a boy in this story who spent 9 weeks believing everything was fine while his grandfather knew better. He did not earn that, and I did it to him anyway. I asked Sylvie one question before I left, and it was the only smart thing I did in the whole month. I asked her what days those 3 deeds got recorded. She turned the top one over and ran her thumb down the stamp in the corner, and then the second, and then the third, and she stopped moving. The 11th of February, the 19th of February, the 3rd of March. I was in Delano, California on all 3 of those days. I have the motel receipts. I have a photograph on my telephone of a busted pallet strap taken on the 19th of February at 8 in the morning in an orchard off a Pond Road, because I sent it to Wyatt to show him what the loader had done. Sylvie said, "Is that meaningful?" And I said, "I am gone from the last week of January until the 2nd week of April, every year, since 1974. She sat back in her chair. I have thought a long time about how to say the next part without making it sound bigger than it is, because there was no conspiracy. There was no calendar on a wall with my dates circled in red. There was a woman who did my bookkeeping and therefore knew, better than my own daughter knew, exactly which 8 weeks of the year I was 1,400 miles away and unreachable except by telephone at night. Nobody had to get me out of the way. Nobody had to drug me or declare me incompetent or move me into a home. I go away every February. I have gone away every February for 52 years, and I have been proud of it, and I have bragged about it at the cafe, and all anybody ever had to do was be patient enough to use my own calendar. I would like every person listening to this to sit with that for about 10 seconds. Not the betrayal part, the predictable part. Ask yourself what 8 weeks of your year a person could set their watch by, because whatever it is that you are proudest of being reliable about is the exact shape of the hole in your fence. It was Arliss who told me the rest, and she told me because she called me, not the other way around. She is 58, and she teaches 4th grade in Great Falls, and she has her mother's hands. She said, "Uncle Ellis, did Marla come see you about the ground?" I said no. There was about 4 seconds of nothing on that line, and then she said, "Well, she came to see me in November." Marla had driven to all 4 of them, Spokane, Cheyenne, Great Falls. She was pleasant, and she was prepared, and she brought a folder. She told them, truthfully, that they each owned a 12th of 160 acres in Vantine County. She told them, truthfully, that most people in their position never see a dime out of ground like that in their whole lives. She told them she would pay $22,000 apiece, cash, in 30 days, no lawyers. Danelle took it. Rob took it in about a day and a half, and Rob has a boy going through a divorce. Kirby thought about it for 3 weeks and then took it. Arliss did not take it. Arliss asked one question, and the question was, "Does Ellis know?" And Marla told her the truth, which was no, not yet. He is in California. And Arliss said, "No, thank you." I asked her why she did not call me in November. It took her a while to answer. Then she said, "Because you would have told me it was fine. You have been telling us for 40 years that we all have got a piece of that place." I figured you knew what that meant. I figured you had thought about it. I had not thought about it. I had said it because it made me feel like a good man in a room. $22,000 apiece. $66,000 total, out of a savings account belonging to a young couple who, as far as anybody in my family knew, were doing all right. And I sat in my kitchen with the phone in my hand, and the one thought I could not get around was not about money at all. It was that, between the 11th of February and the 3rd of March, while I was standing in an orchard in California in a bee suit arguing about frames of brood, 3 people I share a grandmother with signed away the ground my grandfather proved up, and not one of the 3 of them thought that was a thing you ought to phone a man about. Before I get to what came in the mail on the 28th of April, do me one small favor and subscribe. Not for me, I am 76, and I am not building anything. But there is a particular kind of person these stories seem to find, and it is somebody sitting there right now with a place that came down from their folks and no paper on it that they have ever actually read, and the only way that person hears the next part is if enough of you stay. Because the next part is the part I did not know, and I had owned land for 43 years. It came certified, which meant I had to drive into town and sign for it, and I signed for it at the window with my reading glasses on top of my head, and I opened it in the truck. Vandehay versus Vandehay. Filed in the District Court of the 12th Judicial District, Vantine County. Marla Jo Vandehay, plaintiff, holder of an undivided 1/4 interest, and there was a sentence in there about how the property could not be equitably divided in kind, and a request that the court order the entire parcel sold and the proceeds distributed among the owners according to their interests. The entire parcel. The house, the honey house, the shop, the equipment shed my father poured in 1959, 4 registered bee yards, the 2 acres of aspen at the bottom where Doreen is. I read it 3 times in the parking lot of the post office, and then I drove to Sylvie's and went up those stairs faster than I have gone up any stairs since my hip, and I put it on her desk and I said, "She cannot do this. She has got a quarter. I have got 3/4. She cannot do this." Sylvie read it. Then she folded her glasses into her hand and gave me the sentence I would like every person listening to hear once in their life, back while there is still something to be done about it. She said, "Ellis, she can. That is the law. Any co-owner can force the sale of the whole thing, no matter how small their share is." I said, "That cannot be the law." She said, "It is not fair, and it is absolutely the law, and it has been since before Montana was a state. Here is the reasoning. And I have made my peace with the reasoning even though I have not made my peace with anything else. The law will not force people to stay in business together. If you and I own a thing together and I want out, and you will not buy me out, the courts are not going to make me stay tied to you for the rest of my life over a piece of dirt. So anybody with any share at all can go to a judge and say, divide it or sell it. And when the ground is one working place with one house and one well and one road onto it, no judge in the world is going to draw a line through the middle of a kitchen. So, it gets sold. That is how families lose the home place in this country. Not to a criminal, to arithmetic and a second cousin. I sat in Sylvie's office for a long time. What came out of my mouth after that was not an argument. It was this. The state of Montana will not let a stranger register a bee yard within 3 miles of one of mine. That is the actual law. It is in the code. A general apiary site has to sit 3 or more miles from anybody else's, and the reason is so that two outfits do not put their bees on the same forage and starve each other out without either one of them meaning to. The state will do that for my bees. There is nothing anywhere in it that does that for a man's family. Sylvie said she needed a week. I went home. And that evening, about the time the light goes long and gold across that bench, I walked out to the near yard, which is 112 hives sitting in 4 rows on pallets facing southeast, and I went down the rows with my knuckle and I told them. I said, Marla has filed on the place. I said, I do not know yet if I am going to be able to hold it. I said, your grandmother would have known what to do, and I do not. I had not spoken any of that out loud to a living soul. Not to my daughter Lorna, not to Wyatt, not to Arliss, not to Sylvie in the plain words. I said it first to 112 boxes of insects in the last of the light, because a woman who has been dead 6 years made a rule that you tell them everything, and because there was not one other place on this earth I could put it. And then I went in the house, and the phone was ringing, and it was Sylvie, and she had not waited a week. She had waited 4 days. She said, Ellis, there is a part 4. Montana has a law in the books called the Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act. It went in about a dozen years ago. Sylvie had never used it. Most lawyers in a county this size never do, because most people in a county this size never find out about it in time. Here is what it is for. Some legislatures finally noticed that families were losing ground exactly the way I was about to lose mine. Somebody dies without a will. The ground splits among the children die and it splits again, and 40 years later there are 11 people on the deed, and one of them sells his sliver to somebody who does not care, and that somebody files for partition, and the whole place goes on the courthouse steps at 11 in the morning for whatever a speculator feels like paying. So the act does this. If the ground came down through a family, and there is no written agreement among the owners, and at least one of the owners is related to the person it came from, then the court has to find that it is heirs' property. And once it does, everything changes. The court cannot just order a sale. First, it has to order an appraisal of the entire parcel by a disinterested appraiser to find out what the whole thing is actually worth. Then the court sends notice to everybody of that number. And then any owner who did not ask for the sale gets 45 days to buy out every owner who did ask for it. Not at whatever they want, not at whatever they paid, at the appraised value of the whole place, multiplied by their fraction of it. I made Sylvie say it twice. Marla could not make anybody sell my grandfather's homestead. All Marla could do was give somebody the right to buy her. I want to be truthful about my reaction, because I have heard men tell stories like this one, and by this point in the telling they are 10 feet tall. I did not feel 10 feet tall. What I felt, sitting on my own kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet where Doreen kept the flour, was arithmetic. I did not know the number yet, but I could do the shape of it. If that place appraised anywhere in the neighborhood of what people around Kilgore like to say it is worth, a quarter of it was going to be somewhere north of $100,000, and I had $11,400 in the bank and a truck with 412,000 miles on it, and a court was going to give me 45 days. Nobody warns you about that part of being handed a right. A right does not rescue anybody. A right is an invoice with your name across the top and a date on the bottom. I did not tell Wyatt. That is 9 weeks now, and I am counting them out for you on purpose, because I wanted on the record that I knew what I was doing. Word got around anyhow. It always does. Sylvie filed an answer, and an answer is a public document, and there is a woman at the courthouse who is related to half the county by marriage. The Wednesday after that, I went into the ranchette at 6 like I have gone in at 6 for 30 years, and there were 4 men at the long table by the window, and I have known all 4 of them since we were in the same 2-room school out on the Hollow Road. And I sat down and put my hat on the chair, and 3 of them found somewhere else to be inside of about 6 minutes. Loran had to get to the elevator, Deke had a load coming, or Dell did not even bother making one up, he just went. Because the story that was going around by then was not that a young woman had bought up some cousins. The story that was going around was that Ellis Vandehe was suing his own grandson's wife over money. Ivan Steck stayed. He is 81 and he farms the section between my place and the county road, and his father farmed it before him. He did not ask me a single question about any of it. He drank his coffee, and he told me about a bad water pump. And when Verna came around, he put his hand out over my ticket and paid for both. 1 out of 4. I have thought about that a lot too. 1 is not nothing. 1 is the entire difference between a hard year and a year you do not come back from. The money is next, and it is the stretch of this I care for the least. I have never asked anybody for anything, not once. I did not take the operating loans the other outfits took in the 80s. I paid cash for equipment and ran it until it came apart. When Doreen was sick, I sold 200 hives rather than sit in front of a loan officer at 38 years of age and explain my situation to a man in a necktie. That is the same thing, exactly the same thing, that put a deed in a drawer for 35 years instead of $8 a page on the counter. It was never carelessness. It was that I did not want to be a man who had to go stand at a counter and be looked at. Pride is not loud. Pride is the reason a perfectly good piece of paper sits in a drawer for 35 years next to a broken watch. So on the 12th of May, I drove to Idaho Falls and I sat down across from a man named Kurt at Red Wing Apiaries, which is a big outfit, 6,000 head, 3 generations, decent people. And I sold him 400 colonies and every stick of pallet and every strap, and I sold him my almond contract, which is a thing you can do and which is worth more than the bees are. $68,000. Kurt is not a hard man. He knew what he was buying and he knew what it meant. And about halfway through, he set his pen down and said, "Ellis, you sure?" And I said, "If you make me say it twice, I am going to get in my truck." I kept 60 hives. 60 is a hobby. 60 is what a man has when he used to have something. And on the morning of the 14th of May, at 4 o'clock, before the trucks came, I went out with a headlamp and I told them, 4 yards, 400 lids. You have to do it one at a time. That is the whole custom. You cannot stand in the middle of a yard and make an announcement. You knock once and you say it. I said, "You are going to Idaho." I said it 400 times. It took me an hour and 50 minutes, and I sat down twice. And somewhere in the third yard, out past where the ground starts to fall away toward the creek, with the sky just barely coming gray over the high woods, I understood what Doreen had actually been doing to me for 50 years with that custom, and it had nothing to do with bees, and it never had. She was making sure that once in a while I had to say a true thing out loud, all the way through, without anybody to argue with me about it or feel sorry for me or change the subject. She knew exactly what kind of man she married. She knew I would carry a thing for 11 weeks and set it down for no one. So she gave me 400 witnesses that cannot answer back. I told them we sold you to pay a woman for a piece of a place that she bought because I spent 40 years telling people it was theirs. I told them that was the truth and that I was not going to say it any nicer than that. Then the trucks came at 7. And by 2 in the afternoon, there were 400 empty pallet spots on my ground with the grass pressed flat in squares. And if you have never seen a bee yard the day after, I hope you never do. Sylvie called me that evening. The court had appointed the appraiser. His name was Grant Ashbaugh, out of Lewistown, certified general, which is the level you have to be to do this kind of work. He would be walking the property on Thursday the 28th of May at 9 in the morning, and every party with an interest had the right to be present, which meant Marla would be standing on my ground. And so would Wyatt, because Wyatt was a party too, in a way that had nothing to do with the deed. He was going to come because it was his grandfather's place and his wife's lawsuit, and he still, on the 27th of May, did not know one single thing about any of it. Thursday the 28th of May came up clear and about 50 degrees, with a little wind out of the southwest, which is the best weather that bench gets all year, and I have never hated a nice morning that much. Grant Ashbaugh drove up at 4 minutes to 9 in a white pickup with a magnetic sign on the door. He was maybe 40 in a canvas coat, and he had a clipboard and a measuring wheel and a camera, and the thing about him that I want you to understand is that he did not care about a single one of us. He was not on my side. He was not on Marla's side. A court had told him to go find out what 160 acres in Vantine County is worth, and that is the entire content of what was in his head. In my whole life, I do not think I have ever been so grateful for a man who was not interested in me. There were 6 of us. Him, me, Sylvie, Marla, and a young fellow from the Billings firm in shoes that were wrong for that ground, and Wyatt. Wyatt is 31. He has his grandmother's jaw. He came in his own pickup, and he stood off to the side with his hands in his pockets, and when I looked at him, I could see he had been told there was an appraisal and had not been told what an appraisal is for. Ashbaugh started at the house, 1938. He went in the crawl space with a flashlight and came out and wrote for a while, and then he walked the north side and said, out loud to nobody, that the north half is sitting on rubble and not on a poured footing, which I have known since I was 9. Then the honey house, then the shop, then the equipment shed. He wheeled it, he photographed it, he wrote. And then he turned around and looked out at the ground, and he asked the questions in the order they come, and I want to give them to you exactly, because 2 of them decided everything. He said, "Is any of this under irrigation?" I said, "No. There is no water right on it, never has been. It is dry land bench, 14 inches in a good year, and it runs cattle, and it grows what it grows." He wrote that down, and he did not react. Appraisers do not react. That is their whole profession. And then he looked past the shop at the two-track running north through the grass, and he asked the second one. He said, "Where does your legal access come off of?" And I had to stand on my grandfather's homestead in front of 5 people and answer it honestly, which is that the county road ends a mile short of my line at the Steck cattle guard, and that from there you come in on a two-track across Ivan Steck's ground, and that Ivan's father let my father use it starting in 1951, and that in 74 years, nobody has ever written a word of it down. Ashbaugh looked up for the first time all morning. He said, "So there is no recorded easement." I said, "There is a handshake from 1951. He wrote for quite a while. Now, I knew what I had. I have always known what I had. Everybody in this county knows that place is landlocked and that the Stecks have been decent about it for 3 generations, and it did not matter because I was never going to sell it and neither was my father. Ground. You cannot get to legally as ground. Nobody will lend on, and ground nobody will insure the title on, and ground a buyer's lawyer will not let him close on. It is worth exactly what a neighbor will pay for the grass." I looked over at Marla, and she had already done it. Faster than the lawyer in the bad shoes, faster than her own husband, because she is the one in that family who is good with numbers and always has been. She was standing in the grass about 30 feet from me, and she had gone the color of the underside of an aspen leaf. She had never walked it. Not one time. She had driven past it on the county road for 11 years the way everybody does, and she had listened to this family talk about the home place at Christmas for 11 years like it was a bank vault out there under the sky. And Wyatt was looking at her. And then he was looking at me. And then he was looking at the lawyer from Billings, and I watched my grandson put it together standing in the wind on his great-great-grandfather's homestead, and there was not one thing on God's earth I could do about it. He did not yell. He is not built like that. He walked back to his pickup and sat in it with the door open and both feet on the ground for the rest of it. The report came 11 days later. $240,000. The whole 160. The house, the honey house, the shop, the shed, all of it. Marla's 1/4. By the arithmetic the statute lays out, which is the value of the entire parcel multiplied by her fraction of it, came to $60,000. She had paid 66, plus a title company in Great Falls, plus a firm in Billings that had been on it since November. Nobody had cheated her. That is what I need you to hear because I have had 6 months to want it to be otherwise, and it is still not otherwise. No one lied to that woman. She read the same public records I read. She did the same arithmetic anybody could do. She was simply doing it about a piece of ground she had never once set foot on, using a number she got from listening to a family brag at Christmas. She believed what she had been told about a thing instead of going out and opening it, which is the only sin in this entire story, and I committed it first, and I committed it for 40 years. Sylvie filed my election to buy within the 45 days, and the court set a date to pay the money in, and on the 6th of August I walked into the clerk of district court with a cashier's check for $60,000 that used to be 400 beehives and an almond contract, and I handed it across a counter to a woman I have known since she was in Lorna's class. That is what the end of it looked like. There was no courtroom. There was no judge in a robe. There was a counter and a receipt and a woman who said, "Have a good one." I saw Marla once more before that, and I asked her one question. It was in the driveway and it took about 9 seconds, and I have never asked her anything else about any of it, before or since. I said, "Marla, before you wrote those 3 checks, did you ever walk it?" And she stood there and she said, "No." And I said, "I know. If you had, you would have seen there is no road." And that is the whole thing. That is the entire hour I have been taking from you, right there. She did tell me why, and I did not ask her to. She said it fast and looking at the gravel. Wyatt's outfit lost about 60% of his colonies over 2 winters, which is happening to bee outfits all over this country right now, and which there is no way to make plain to a person who has not stood in an empty yard in April. She is the one who keeps his books. There was not another soul alive who had seen how far under the 2 of them were, and she could not make herself say it out loud to her own husband, so she went and found the one thing in the family that everybody always said was money. She said, "I have heard about the home place my whole marriage, like it was a bank account out there. Nobody ever once said it was 160 acres you cannot get to. And I want to tell you what that is, since I have been at this a while now and I have earned the right to say it plain. That is the same failure I have. Hers cost her $66,000 in about 9 months. Mine cost me 400 hives over 40 years, and I want anybody listening to understand that I do not consider myself the better of the 2 of us. I just had more time to be wrong in. I did not tell Wyatt about the books. It was not mine to tell, and I had already spent 9 weeks knowing something about that boy's life that he did not know, and I was not going to add to it. She told him herself 3 days later at their kitchen table. He called me that night. He did not say much. He said, "Grandpa, I did not know." I said, "Son, I never thought you did." Then the two of us sat on the line and let it be quiet, and it was all right. Now here is what got fixed. One thing. Just the one. On the 14th of August, Ivan Steck and I drove into Kilgore together in his truck, and we went up to the counter at the clerk and recorder, and we recorded an easement. 30 feet wide, running from the Steck cattle guard north to my line, described by meets and bounds by a surveyor out of Stanford, who charged me $900, permanent, running with the land, so that it belongs to that ground, and not to me, and not to Ivan, and not to anybody's good nature. $8 a page. It took 11 minutes. Ivan signed it and handed the pen back and said, "Well, hell, Ellis, 74 years. And our lease still has her 12th, and she is going to keep it. And this fall, she and I sat down at Sylvie's and signed a written agreement between the two of us about what happens to that ground and who has to be asked first, which is the piece of paper my father should have had in 1983 and did not, because he had 3 children who all got along. They all get along. That is not a plan. That is a hope with no signature on it." Wyatt borrowed against his truck and bought 60 colonies back out of Idaho in September. Not mine. Mine are gone and they are not coming back, and I am not going to pretend otherwise for the sake of a nice ending. 60 new ones on the flat below the shop where the grass is still pressed down in squares. And about 3 weeks ago, I came around the corner of the honey house at dusk to shut the compressor off, and his girl Nell, who was 7, was down in that yard by herself. She was going along the row with her knuckle. "Knock. Say it. Move to the next one." She was telling them that her daddy had signed a pollination contract for next February, and that they were going to California, and that she was going to get to go too. I stood there behind the honey house in the dark and listened to a 7-year-old tell 4,000 bees something true out loud all the way through, and that is how I found out my grandson had put his outfit back together, which is where I started this, if you think about it. An old man standing outside a wall in the dark, hearing what a woman and his family had to say when she did not know he was there. Only this time, I did not have to decide whether to walk in. I have got one more thing, and then I am done. I told you at the beginning that a dead hive is full of honey. Everything in its place, comb drawn out, frames heavy, and nobody home. And I told you my father's rule, which is that you do not open a hive because you are worried. You open it on a schedule, because the day you start looking only when you are worried is the day you have decided that being calm is the same as being right. I want to give you that back now, and I want you to hear what is actually in it, because I did not hear it for 51 years, and I said it out loud every spring. The rule is not about bees, and it is not about being careful. The rule is that quiet is not information. Quiet is the absence of information, and every single thing I lost inside of quiet. So this week, go pull the chain of title on the ground your folks left you. Go ask the clerk who was on it besides you. Go ask a lawyer of your own, not the family's, not the estate's, yours, whether anybody in your county can force the sale of a place you have lived on for 50 years, because in most of this country they can, and the fee to find that out is smaller than you think, and the fee to find it out late is everything you have got. And do it on a Tuesday when nothing is wrong. That is the whole trick. Do it when nothing is wrong. Go open something that looks fine.